So today we're going to be talking about a story which is kind of crazy, and it's to do with a food influencer who accidentally got a restaurant shut down after the chef was rude to her. And then some family members got involved, the internet got involved, and there's also a crazy response from the rude chef. So let's get into all of that now. So this all happened back in around July 2025, and it involves an influencer named Carla, who is a food influencer in the San Francisco area. She had around 15,000 followers on TikTok at the time, so she was what's called a micro influencer, which are influencers that have a smaller number of followers, but it can still be quite a decent sized audience. So the backstory is that Carla had agreed to do a collab with a relatively new restaurant in the San Francisco area called Kiss Cafe. Kiss Cafe was set up by two guys, Eric Lin and also Luke Sung. Luke Sung is the chef, and he was kind of a well-known chef. He had been award-winning and he was kind of well-known, and he had other existing restaurants already. Carla had agreed to do a collab with this restaurant, and she then went to the restaurant. She arrived early. She said she was just kind of filming some B-roll for her videos. She spoke to the guy who she'd actually arranged this collab with in the DM, which was not the chef, it was the co-owner. But then something a bit weird happened because Carla was just sat there in this really small space. But the chef then came out and basically started saying in front of Carla that she wasn't big or famous enough to be doing this collab. And then he did the classic line of, "Do you know who I am?" So we're going to watch Carla's video where she talks about what exactly happened.
I had a TikTok collab with a new restaurant in Hayes Valley that I was really excited for. I had it planned since last week. I'm continuing to film the setup in the kitchen and stuff because it's really cute, but I hear the host and this other guy talking. And this other guy is behind the counter, so it's a small restaurant. He's like 2 or 3 feet away from me, so I can hear everything they're saying. The new guy is asking the host who I am, why I'm here, and how many followers I have on TikTok and what my TikTok is. And this guy is not happy about it. He was saying that I have too little followers and that this was a mistake. At this point, I am turning red because I'm so embarrassed and I feel really disrespected, but the new guy comes to me and I introduce myself, I shake his hand, and I'm telling him that I'm still excited about this collab. Immediately he says, "Did you do any research on this restaurant? Do you know what we do? Do you know who we are?" And mind you, they're really new. They don't have a website, but I know their menu front and back because whenever I go to a restaurant, I study the menu because I know what I like to order and I want to know what the restaurant is that I'm collabing with. He is smirking while he's listening to me and saying that I didn't do any research and that he thinks that there's been some miscommunication. He asks for my TikTok, which clearly you've done no research about me as well. And he starts scrolling through and playing my TikToks on full volume at the restaurant. After scrolling like 2 times, he says to me that he doesn't think my videos are at the level at which he wants his restaurant to be represented. He goes on to say that my audience and my followers are not the kind of people that are going to be at his restaurant. It seemed like he was insinuating that my followers would not be able to afford to eat at this restaurant. Then he says, not to be snobby, but do you know who I am? And he said that his daughter has 600,000 followers on TikTok and that I'm not at that level. At this point, I'm crying and I want to get out. So I tell him that I'm no longer interested in doing the collab.
So yeah, from what Carla was saying, it sounds like this chef was quite rude to her and very dismissive of the fact that she only had 15,000 subscribers or followers, whatever. And I mean, I do have kind of personal experience with this. Obviously, I have this channel which has around 10,000 subscribers. I have another YouTube channel called Drag Tea Served with Matt that some of you may have heard of. It's about a show called RuPaul's Drag Race. So I remember when I was first starting out and I probably had around 15,000 subscribers, I reached out to brands and things like that to do collabs. And quite often they would say, basically, no, you're not big enough. You don't have enough subscribers or whatever. And it's not nice, but it is business. But I think it's another thing when someone literally to your face comes up and says, you're not on our level, your followers can't afford to eat here. I mean, that is another kind of arrogance that I can't quite believe in a way. And to me, the weirdest thing is, even if the chef didn't know about this collab in advance, I don't know, if it was me, I would have just been like, you know what, maybe this isn't the type of influencer that we're looking for. But given that they're already here and my co-owner has already organized this, maybe I'll just go along with it and who cares. I feel like it takes a certain type of person with a certain type of ego to actually go to that person and start speaking to them in that way and basically disrespect them in front of everyone in a restaurant. So Carla posted this video, and you'll notice that Carla didn't name the actual restaurant itself, but the internet did what it does best, and they very quickly worked out that it was this Kiss Cafe in San Francisco. The video instantly went viral, and it's now racked up almost 30 million views. And as I said, Carla had around 15,000 subscribers at the time. She now has 531,500 followers. So this video absolutely exploded with so many people sending support to Carla, basically saying how awful the chef was, that there was no need for him to discredit her and be so rude to her at the restaurant. One other interesting part of this story is, as you may remember from Carla's video, she said that the chef mentioned that he had a daughter who had way more followers than Carla did and that she's not on her level. Well, I think because he brought his daughter into it, I think the daughter then started getting some backlash as well. So after Carla posted this video and it blew up on the internet, the chef's daughter Issa actually got involved and she commented on Carla's video, basically supporting Carla. So the comment said, "Hi Carla, I'm genuinely so sorry you experienced this. The way you were treated is completely unacceptable and no one should ever feel disrespected or uncomfortable in that way. I'm honestly really embarrassed that you had to go through that. Please know I'm genuinely on your side and I'll be having a serious conversation with my dad and the co-owner involved to make sure something like this never happens to anyone. I've DM'd you just to check in and see if there's anything I can do to make this right, whether that's covering your time or helping in any other way. So sorry." So that is definitely props to Issa, the daughter, for doing this, because she instantly recognized that her dad had done something wrong and she isn't defending her dad. She is basically calling her dad out and agreeing that his behavior was unacceptable. Issa also followed this up by posting a video on her TikTok, which we'll watch now.
What happened to her was not okay, and within hours, as soon as I saw the video, I knew exactly who it was about. I called my dad, his business partner, and I reached out to her immediately after she shared it to have him apologize in person, because nobody deserves to be treated that way, and I wanted her to know that she has my support. I know I wasn't the one who said those things, but hearing him use me as his daughter to belittle another person, a creator or not, was a complete shock to me and was unacceptable. But this isn't the first time I felt hurt by his actions and how he has treated people.
Not long after Carla posted this video, the restaurant obviously got found out. People realized that it was Kiss Cafe. The cafe then got inundated with what's called review bombing, which is when people left lots and lots of one-star reviews saying basically how awful the chef is and how rude he was and things like that. So this really brought down their average score and it basically ended up having almost 1 star overall. Not long after, the restaurant did post on their Instagram basically apologizing to Carla, but also announcing that Luke, the chef, had been removed from the restaurant. So we're going to read out the response that they posted on Instagram. So it said, "Hi everyone, I am Luke Sung, previously chef of Kiss Cafe. It was important for me to first apologize to Carla privately and step away from Kiss Cafe before publicly apologizing. Carla, I'm truly sorry for my actions towards you. I was condescending, hurtful, and intimidating. You did not deserve to be made to feel less than or unimportant. Nobody does. Regardless, I thank you for teaching me a valuable lesson in kindness and respect. There are no excuses to be made, and I've decided it's time for me to step away from Kiss Cafe permanently and in all capacities. I also want to be clear, the responsibility of this whole situation is mine alone, and my behavior should not be a reflection on anyone else who works there or anyone who is related to me. I truly care about my staff, and I'm devastated that my actions have impacted both them and their families. I have worked with many of the employees at the restaurant for years, and they are incredible people who don't deserve to suffer due to my behavior. Finally, the last person I want to apologize to is my daughter, Isabel. I am sorry I put you in this position and am ashamed that you had to be the one to own up for my mistakes. All I have ever wanted to do is give you the opportunity to create a better life for yourself than the one I grew up with, and I failed you in the worst way. I came to this country to give all of my kids the best chance to work hard towards their goals, and now I've given the public nothing but a reason to tear them down for my actions. And in the comments, it looks like a lot of people are basically just saying things like, he's only sorry because he got caught. In terms of this apology, I think it is quite clear that he is taking responsibility, at least in this particular post. He's admitting that it was his fault and that his behavior was unacceptable. And he also raised a good point that the staff at the restaurant, as well as his daughter, shouldn't have to suffer because of what he did. So after all of this happened, as I said, Carla gained a lot of followers, so good for her. I think at least something good came out of this quite nasty experience she had. And then the restaurant, Kiss Cafe, shut down for several weeks. And like I said, Luke was no longer part of the restaurant. But they then sort of quietly reopened and rebranded the restaurant, and it's now called Bosque. But it looks like Bosque is doing well. They've got good reviews on Google and all of the people seem to be happy with it. I don't think anyone I've seen has mentioned Kiss Cafe. So I think because they sort of soft launched the new restaurant and they haven't made a big splash, I think it's kind of gone under the radar a little bit and people haven't realized the backstory of what actually happened. However, one thing that I found a little bit shocking and something that made me slightly doubt the authenticity in a way of Luke, the chef's apology, is that he then did an interview not long afterwards with the San Francisco Standard, where he talked about what happened. And I'll go through it in a minute, but to me, it kind of came across like maybe he wasn't really taking responsibility in the way that I thought he should have. So one of the first things that rang alarm bells in my mind slightly when I was reading this interview was the first question they asked in this interview was, it's been 3 weeks since everything went down with Kiss Cafe. Why are you willing to speak about it now? And Luke said, my kids advise me not to speak up because they think people will pick apart what I say and give me more hate, which that part could be true. But then, this is the part, it says, but I can't imagine it being any worse. I'm genuinely concerned about the future of quality, of chefing, of restaurant workers, of human behavior. Now, this was the part where, to me, it kind of sounded like I sort of saw the writing on the wall that maybe he was kind of blaming people's reaction to it rather than his own behavior that caused it. So the next part of the questions was they asked Luke from his perspective what happened with Carla. And they mentioned that his business partner, Eric Lynn, was the one who actually communicated with Carla to organize this collab. And Luke said, she came in at 5 p.m. on a Tuesday when the dining room was empty. My partner didn't tell me she was coming until she got there. I didn't know anything about her. I thought she'd say, hey, Mr. Sung, I read about you. I am so happy to be doing this with you. Now, this part's a little bit odd because it kind of sounds like a little bit of an ego trip that he thought she was going to come to him and be like, oh, hi, I love you so much. Even though he has already said he didn't know anything about this collab and presumably Carla didn't know anything about him either. He then says, but she showed up, sat down, and didn't say hi. My high expectation for professionalism has failed me again and again. It just brings disappointment. Now, again, to me, this comes across as him saying, because she didn't come to me and say hello, that's why I was effectively butthurt about it. So again, this is slightly undoing the genuineness of his apology, in my opinion. So he then went on to explain what happened. He said he looked up her TikTok and it said the first video he saw was a, quote, creamy spaghetti in a pan with sliced, overcooked New York steak. Right, okay. And it said, I was running a special with this beautiful coho salmon. I didn't want to be misrepresented by someone who doesn't understand the difference between Atlantic salmon and king salmon. Now, I don't know where he got that from. I don't know where he got the idea that Carla wouldn't know the difference, but that has literally nothing to do with it. It sounds to me like he's basically just trying to say she's a bad chef or doesn't know anything about cooking. I actually did check out some of Carla's other videos that she had done before, and I thought her pasta and food dishes actually looked quite nice. And she's not trying to be a chef. She's trying to just be a food influencer. So again, to me, this was just, it sounds like Luke was trying to take a few cheap shots at her to try and make it sound like she doesn't know what she's talking about, when that was actually nothing to do with it in the first place. He then said that he went over to her and said something along the lines of, I think there may have been a mistake. I'm not sure if we have the same audience, which is not quite what Carla said. She said that he basically said, I don't think your viewers would be able to afford to eat here, which to me sounds probably more in line with the attitude that he's giving, to be honest. He then said he asked her things like, do you know anything about Kiss Cafe? Did you look it up? Do you know what we're trying to do here? And then he said there was a lot of these, do you know? And she was intimidated, which I can understand. So he's sort of accepting responsibility. He then says that apparently her response was, I know you're a wine bar and you don't have a website, as if there's no information on Google. And again, this kind of sounds to me like he's slightly telling the story from his side, trying to paint Carla as like this sort of snotty influencer, which I'm not sure is really what happened. And he apparently said, well, it's your work and you have to do your research. I know how hard my daughter, Issa, who's an influencer, works to do her things. She would never head to a gig unprepared. Now, I don't think any of this unprepared was ever part of the story. So again, this is very much giving the vibe that he is now trying to twist the narrative against Carla rather than admitting that he was just not very nice. But apparently, according to Luke, Carla said she felt disrespected. And then she said, we're not going to eat here. But before she left, she said, the restaurant world is really small. There will be consequences. And as we found out, there were consequences. So she was kind of right. So the interviewer then asks him about his daughter, Issa, who self-identifies as the daughter of immigrant parents, who's been trying her whole life to educate her father on regulating his emotions and his words, and asked how he feels about that. And his response to this was, well, my daughter is my daughter, right? Does your father lecture you? I didn't feel like I was disrespecting Carla. So again, this feels like he's very much not taking responsibility, which goes against his apology, which is a little bit odd. And he says that he apparently said to Carla in that moment, I feel disrespected that you don't even know who the chef is. Now, I mean, I guess you could make the argument that Carla should have looked up who the chef was, but I don't know, if they don't have a website and there's not that much information about them, she may have just not known. But it very much is giving the energy of, do you know who I am? Because even though he is a James Beard award-winning chef or whatever, you don't need to go around telling people that. There's that expression, you don't need to tell people who you are. People will know who you are from the way that you act. So it very much is giving to me, he was just angry that she wasn't giving him the praise that he felt he deserved. He then gets asked when he found out that Carla had posted this video. He said his daughter called him that night and explained what happened because he didn't know about it. And apparently his daughter stayed up all night reading everything that was going down and all the different comments. He said that his daughter ended up getting 20,000 hate comments, which is a lot by the sound of it, but it could be true. But the part is that obviously that was nothing to do with the daughter, so it is really unacceptable to send the hate to her. But it's just unfortunate because he was the one that mentioned his daughter and brought it into the conversation. Apparently his son, who's a musician, also got a bunch of hate from it as well. And he said that they were, quote, traumatized. And the next morning at 6:30, my daughter called me and said that she'd responded to Carla saying she didn't condone my behavior. She did the right thing. So it looks like Luke is actually admitting that his daughter was right by siding with Carla, but so far his behavior isn't quite giving that from what we're reading in this interview. They asked him if he thinks he did the right thing by firing himself, because he made it clear that he didn't get fired, he left the restaurant, not that he got fired. Again, it sounds a little bit like an ego thing, but I guess maybe he's just clarifying. But he said, no, because of the whole hate army was the reason he left, okay? So not because of his behavior, because of the hate army. Our Google rating went to 1.1 with 3,000 negative reviews. I had to protect my children. So again, it kind of sounds like he's blaming the hate mob rather than his own behavior. So they then ask Luke why he stepped back from Domo, which is his other restaurant, which is a sushi restaurant in Hayes Valley. And he said that another influencer called Ed Choi said that everyone should start sending hate to Domo instead, because obviously now Luke was no longer part of Kiss Cafe. So it sounds like he's now blaming this Ed Choi for then trying to ruin his other business. And then this is the part that really solidified in my mind that I'm not sure his actual apology was that genuine. Kind of at the end of the interview, they asked him what his takeaway is from this experience. And Luke said, I mean, why would a young chef go and learn how to cook today if some inexperienced anybody can come in and close your restaurant? They don't even need to hear what you have to say. Now, again, to me, This is very much coming across that he is not actually taking responsibility for what he did and realizing that his poor behavior was the reason this happened. He's basically just blaming the hate mob and people's reaction. Now, I think there is something to be said about the fact that the internet can go wild, and I'm sure a lot of people were probably going overboard. And, there's no need to kick a dead horse once it's already dead. But the bit that I just couldn't get my head around, because I didn't find this interview until after I'd already done the research into this story. And I was kind of mind blown by this because in his original apology, it actually sounded quite genuine and that he was actually sorry for what he did. But after reading this interview, I'm not sure he actually is. I think he's just more trying to blame people's reaction rather than actually realizing what he said was wrong. And finally, in the interview, they asked, what's next now that you've closed Kiss Cafe and you've stepped back from Domo, your other restaurant? And he said, my family is going to therapy together soon. Everything is broken into pieces. I have to try and pick it up and glue it back together. I have to just let it heal. And that seems to be the end of the story from what I can see. As I said, this happened all back in kind of July, August 2025. So it's been a few months now since all of this went down. But I think the key takeaway for me from this is, first of all, I'm kind of glad that Carla did stand up for herself and kind of the micro influencer community, because just because someone has only 15,000 subscribers, that doesn't mean that they aren't worth anything or that they're not worth people's time, especially if someone else has already agreed for them to come to the restaurant to do a collab. With micro influencers, and I include myself in this, a lot of times having a smaller audience actually means that it's a lot more of a dedicated audience. So that doesn't mean that we aren't worth anything. And it certainly is not acceptable for someone to literally talk about someone when they're feet away from them and then go to their face and then say, you don't deserve to be here, you're not on my level, do you know who I am? And I was really hoping that maybe this interview with Luke was going to show that he was sorry for what he did and that he realizes that that behavior is not acceptable. But from what I'm seeing, it sounds like he's more just angry that he got caught and because of the hate mob, rather than that he's actually learned anything. And I also think it's very telling that his own daughter spoke out against him and sided with the creator, because I think if that hadn't happened, that might have fed into his delusions even more. But let me know in the comments what you think, because I feel like you can kind of argue it both ways. Do you side with the creator because of how she was spoken to and the fact that she was disrespected by this rude chef? Or do you think that the chef had a valid point by saying that it was kind of the hate mob and that the reaction was too much? If you'd like to get early access to my videos as well as other benefits, please consider subscribing to my Patreon. It just costs a few dollars a month and it really helps support my channel, and I'll leave a link to that in the description. Please make sure you like and comment on this video to help tell the algorithm this is a great video, and please make sure you subscribe to my channel because it really does make a huge difference. Thanks so much for watching, and I hope to see you again in a future video. Thank you, bye!